So we've been talking about the aspects of the Four Noble Truths. We've gone over the first three truths. The final, or the fourth, the last of the Four Noble Truths, is the truth of the path. The truth has four aspects. The principal knowledge or the principal element of the path that's addressed in this treatise is can be described as Dhammeto Beshira. Dhammeto Beshira is the wisdom that perceives, that's understood to be directly perceives selflessness. That wisdom is the main element of the path, because that wisdom, that knowledge, that awareness has the unique capacity to overcome the root cause, or the roots, the seeds of the mental afflictions that are the cause of samsara. In a broader sense, there are other elements of the path. The path as a whole includes also elements that are referred to as means. And one point to be aware of and keep in mind is that there are associated qualities that accompany that wisdom in many other elements that are part of the path. In particular, what differentiates the Mahayana path, truth of the path, from the Hinayana truth of the path, or the truth of the path for the listener's vehicle, is that essential wisdom that perceives selflessness for the Hinayanist only has the power to eliminate the obstacles or the obscurations that are the mental afflictions themselves. In the Mahayana path, there are two obstacles, two forms of obscurations, two forms of obstacles that need to be eliminated. Not only the mental afflictions, but also the subtler obscurations to what needs to be known. What needs to be known, but usually subtle obstacles to omniscience. And those subtle obstacles to omniscience, one of the elements that enables that wisdom to uproot not only the mental afflictions but also the obstacles to omniscience is the accompanying power of the elements that we call means. So the principal an attribute of means can be associated with or identified with bodhicitta. So bodhicitta, the presence of bodhicitta, the fact that one is cultivating bodhicitta, and that accompanies that wisdom, gives that wisdom the power, the added power to uproot the more subtle obstacles. And more generally, then we say all of the so among the two so-called accumulations, the merit accumulation, which includes various other transcendent virtues, the paramitas, the first several paramitas in particular are associated with merit. And that merit, combined with bodhicitta, as it is built up, as it becomes more and more stronger and more developed, then that gives added power to the wisdom to eliminate more and more of not only the mental afflictions but also the obstacles to omniscience. So the wisdom itself is the principal quality of the other half of the pair of accumulations, meaning the accumulations of knowledge or the accumulation of wisdom. So when we say the wisdom that perceives selflessness, so there are different forms of selflessness in the Mahayana, for example, beyond just the selflessness of the person, and also as sort of part of the package, to use a loose word, then that wisdom not only includes the selflessness of the person, selflessness of the phenomenon, in the case of the Mahayana, but also it includes the direct realization of subtle impermanence, that direct realization of conditioned suffering of conditioned existence. those aspects of the truth of suffering also represent an aspect or an element of the overall elements that make up the so-called collection of, or accumulation of wisdom. So when we talk about the specific aspects of the truth of the path, the first one is the aspect of being a path, the path aspect. The essential meaning of the term path as one of the four aspects of the truth of the path is understood, or should be understood, to mean Karbe go up means the capacity or the possibility or the opportunity to achieve liberation. It creates the opportunity to achieve liberation. Creates the opportunity, or you can say more generally, it means it is the essential cause that brings about liberation, you can say. So it is a path in that sense. It leads directly to liberation. And so an example of the truth of the path is when you first achieve the first element of the transcendent path, when you perceive that Dhamme Dokwe Shira, that wisdom that perceives selflessness directly, then that's the moment at which the so-called path of seeing is attained. And then that wisdom has the ability to overcome the Tongbang. The Tongbang is the particular form of the obstacles that are abandoned by the path of seeing. Hence the word Tong means Tong means see. Bang means abandoned. So Tongbang means those objects which are abandoned by the path of seeing. So it is that initial element of the overall collection of seeds of all the obstacles, the roughest, the first portion of the obstacles that are abandoned when you achieve that realization for the first time. And then that represents, by that abandonment, the real attainment of the qualities that will ultimately lead to liberation. So in that sense, the element of the aspect of being a path is the path that is opened or created or becomes real when you achieve that transcendent realization. So the path of seeing, which is the initial form of the transcendent path, is called the path of seeing, or should be understood to mean the stage or the truth. So of truth meaning reality directly for the first time. And that is the sort of defining characteristic of the path of seeing. It marks the point at which one becomes an Arya for the first time. And that occurs when you generate that direct realization of selflessness. The truth here means that direct realization of selflessness, the truth of selflessness. And then the first moment of it is called that non-interruption path, right? The Vachemelam. So that's one aspect of the truth of the path. First element of the truth of the path. And so that particular non-interruption path or uninterrupted path, it has certain elements of the obstacles which are referred to as its murkel. Murkel means the obstacles that are specifically the ones that wisdom is able to serve as an antidote for. So that first moment of wisdom cannot remove all of the antidotes. So it's not an antidote. Nyembo means antidote. So wisdom is an antidote in the sense that it destroys some portion of the obstacles, of the obscurations, mental afflictions or subtle obstacles. And each time and each stage of the path has its own corresponding obstacles that are the ones that path is an antidote for. So when that path runs its course and you complete it, then you become an Arya, but you still have the remaining portions of the path to cultivate in order to abandon the remainder of the obstacles. So that remaining portion of the path that you still need to practice is known as the path of meditation. So the path of meditation is understood just as the path of seeing is understood as the first moment at which you perceive truth directly. The path of meditation is that portion of the path during which you continue to cultivate that same wisdom, but it becomes stronger as you develop more forms of that direct realization, and then that stronger form of that wisdom is able to gradually and progressively get rid of the remainder of the obstacles.
That's it. That's Siddham Prandu Nugen Nubese Jarandu Jalat Pushkavin Kukala Sintuba.
Lasso.
Kurang Kalari Kalari. Ordination Kupanga Tipa Kosharati Kavindu. Kurang Tonum Bajem Nanki Kalar Dilla. Tomba Kunda. Tomba. You guess Prana Pakoshi Shabi. Prana Tibe Panja Chiava. Prang Pangi. Or Sharati Kavina. And the Kala Senjava. Tichedi. Panja Koshika Shabi. Tonum Bajem Nanki Koshika Panyabi. And you Panjatilla. The Prang Gil Panjas. No gas.
So the technical description of the nature of that wisdom as serving as an antidote, each form of it at the various levels of the path has its own share, its own portion, its own corresponding obstacles that it has the capacity to remove. So then, let's say in the path of seeing, there at the beginning of the first level of the obstacles are those that are produced by an erring reasoning. Those forms of mental afflictions that are due to misunderstanding about the nature of reality, and then that leads you to form ideas that support in a bad way the mental afflictions. So when that erring thought is eliminated, then the roughest level of the mental afflictions are destroyed, and you no longer are subject to wrong view, but you still have the underlying habitual, deeper more deeply ingrained elements of the mental system. So then that first path has that type of obstacle as its share in that which it particularly serves as an antidote for. So once it's removed, then they're no longer there to be the share of something else. So the next level of the non-interruption path, and it too has some specific obstacles that it serves as an antidote for. So that word muakel means it's the portion of the antidotes that it serves. The portion of the obstacles that wisdom serves as an antidote for. So when we talk about the aspects of the truth of the path, and we have these four separate terms, we shouldn't think that they represent different forms of knowledge or different distinct types of... They are sort of different significant ways of recognizing the path as being the true path that will bring about liberation. So the idea of the path was that the first aspect was that it is the knowledge that creates the possibility of reaching enlightenment, and so in that sense, a path. So the second aspect is not talking about something different. It's talking about the same thing, but from looking at it conceptually from a different way in terms of how we should view its correctness, its validity, and that it is in fact the true path. So the second aspect, we're taking these, and I don't know that this is the absolute order in which they have to be taken, but a second attribute aspect is called rikpa. And rikpa, I believe the Sanskrit word is yukti. And yukti comes from a root which means to be proper or to be correct. Again, in this sense, to correct as a method, a correct method to overcome the obstacles. So just as the first aspect was said to be the path in the sense that it creates the opportunity to achieve liberation, then the truth of the path also should be understood as a correct method, a proper method, a valid method, in that it genuinely serves as an antidote for the obstacles. It's not misdirected. It's directed properly at the removal of the obstacles. And in that sense, it is a valid path, a true path, a correct path.
Tatene tuba seti semgine ju tuba. Semgine ju ripala semgine ju chitao shindu tobarba. Sem rashimeba tobarba. Sem tameba tobarba. Yesan semgine ju chitao shindu ripas. Tubas.
So the third aspect is, in Tibetan it's called druba, and so this comes from a root which has two sort of main ideas associated with it. Druba can mean to produce, to bring about, or it can mean, in a more logical sense, to establish. And so one way of thinking of that term is that the path is the means by which one correctly establishes the true nature of the mind. So it is a form of knowledge which establishes for you, for the practitioner who attains it, the true nature of the mind.
Ni jeans ni jeans never jeans to the battle tabat message tabat never to put the namti tabat send over never chiva lam tamit to the tabat to never chiva tabat never jimba chivas ni jeans.
Then the fourth aspect is an active form of a noun that has a sort of like an active participial noun, in the sense of that which definitely brings about, or that which definitely Jampa means to bring forth, to bring forth. Definitely brings forth the result of liberation. So that wisdom it has can be understood as the certain means, the certain, not in a general sense, but certain in the sense of definite or unerring means for bringing about liberation.
That is number. Kunjus at that is number the young some Lola deep with Chevatilla Consia, Congassi to Ba, Kundu Konkaya Seti, Shiti Shaneti, Lola Yania and the Jiba Chiba, Teacher Konkia Sigarva,
Sejikisha.
La
Sejikisha.
Shiji, Shiji, Revjin Metaba in the Metabati, Ayane and the Yellow Chain, Bichi at the Lanico, Metaba Consilva. That to him. Deshi number Kunsiati, Deshi number Metachu Lasso, Chutuputi, Rinji to Kumbayana, Metaba Tango, Metaba Yilache, Yane, who's Madura. That Deshi number content, Deshi number Yane, and Yilache, Jimpachi at the Kunsia.
So, how should we think of these, all these aspects, these 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths? So we should think of them as something that we should reflect upon repeatedly, and as we do so, that will allow us to become more familiar. We will become have a clearer regain as we continue to reflect on it again and again. Then our appreciation of what the import of each of those aspects takes on greater clarity and deeper understanding, and so that reflecting on each of them repeatedly is what we should think of as the essence of meditation. Meditation is a process of familiarizing yourself with some specific then understanding in relation to any given object. And we can do them in an orderly manner, meaning starting with the first of them would be the first of the four aspects of the truth of suffering, which is impermanence. And we can take any particular object that is a conditioned entity and use that as the basis for reflecting on the meaning of impermanence, and doing it repeatedly in order to become more aware of what that really means.
Rangi tendi yara chumi tendi samni ne to tendi tila namja chogi tendi memo chogi tendi simi yara ti shi ki tendi tsani yara pati san tendi yara chumi ti samde kone longjulu to samde kone tini to tabatu yara taba.
So another way to think of the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths is that taken all together, they are the system which enables us to logically, and then in a reasoning manner, in a manner that will generate certainty in our minds about the nature of liberation as liberation from samsara, and that all of the 16 of the aspects must be taken into account in order to properly accomplish that, which is to prove to yourself that there is such a thing as liberation and it's possible to achieve it. And here the goal is that on the basis of that understanding, then you can develop true renunciation. Renunciation is the aspiration to achieve a liberation, and in order to develop that aspiration, you have to know that there is such a thing as liberation. It's possible to achieve, and it's possible for you to achieve, and then you can develop the aspiration to achieve it. So all 16 aspects play a role in enabling you to do so. That's one system that has that capacity. A second system is the 12 limbs of dependent origination. So typically the Four Noble Truths are the doctrine, the Buddha's teaching that is associated with the followers of the listener's vehicle, the Shravaka, so-called Shravakas. Those who follow that are the followers of the Shravaka vehicle. Then another type of disciple is a disciple who learns from the teacher and then follows the spiritual path kind of in isolation from others, and that is Pratyeka Buddhas. Pratyeka Buddha is the person who seeks enlightenment in a solitary manner. And generally the path that's associated with them, or that they typically rely on, is the doctrine of dependent origination, the 12 limbs of dependent origination. That doctrine has two modes to it. One mode, the first mode, when you start with ignorance and end with old age and death, that is the afflicted process, the process of the 12 limbs that perpetuate samsaric existence. And so that describes the process of the state of affliction, which has a causal aspect to it and a resultant aspect to it. And so the forward order of those 12 limbs represents the form of dependent origination that addresses the process of affliction. Then the opposite of that is the process of number Jama is purification. Purification in the sense of freeing yourself from that state of affliction, and that refers to the reversed order of the 12 limbs of dependent originating persistence. By putting a stop to ignorance, you put a stop to projecting karma. By putting a stop to projecting karma, and so on down the line, and then meditating on that phase of the 12 limbs of dependent origination becomes the means initially by which the person who is disposed to follow the path in that manner will develop, in fact, the same renunciation to seek the liberation that that the person becomes aware of by reflecting on the meaning of dependent origination, as opposed to the Four Noble Truths. So this doctrine, the doctrine of the Four Noble Truths, which the Buddha taught, is a doctrine which is not meant to be accepted on faith. It's a doctrine which we, as his followers, are meant to prove through reasoning for ourselves, to prove the truthfulness of, in the first of 16 aspects, is the impermanence of samsara existence, and so on. And the type of reasoning, inferential reasoning, that one employs has a special name for it. It's what we generally think of as inference, but the precise term for it is a reasoning that is based upon, or which is means based upon, I think in a loose way is what it means, based upon the nature of entities, the nature of things. So what it means more broadly is that this form of reasoning ultimately starts with what's observable, what we as ordinary beings can directly perceive from our own experience. Using that as the starting point, then Buddha gave instruction about how to infer things from what we can perceive from ordinary experience, and that will give us an understanding about the significance of our ordinary experience in terms of things that are not directly evident to us, that are not or directly perceivable, but need to be inferred. So subtle impermanence is something that is not directly observed, but knowledge of it is gained by examining the nature of observable entities. And so in Buddhism, then inferential reasoning as it applies to the Four Noble Truths in particular is to be understood that way, that it starts with the 5 skandhas, which we can observe about ourselves, and then it asks us to look at it and determine what we can learn by examining the nature of these 5 skandhas.
다 녀리 리베트 주스 다 녀리 시아틀티 바 녀리 시아트 타바다 탐지 켐니 다 녀리 리베트 주디 녀리 공부 취진스 랑기 균년부터 세가 유지 랑기 균 민내지가 년부터 내배치 아니 녀리 공부 취진스 랑기 균지 니 세베 니 세베 야리스 랑기 균지 년부터 세베 야리스
그렇죠.
이 일단 그래서 랑기 균지라 내지면부터 내야리스 내지면부터 어때였어? 지금
so then that denshi 기던다고 저기요.
다디 den시를 왜 잘 봐. 랑니네 이렇게.
Okay. So now then that's a general way of thinking about the Four Noble Truths. Then now the term of the highest good, or Tibetan Nyabadalekpa, which means that one of the forms of the ultimate goal of Buddhism, of which there are two forms, liberation and omniscience. So if we think of the meaning of that term, ultimate goodness, as it relates to the first goal, the goal of liberation, then we can understand that in a more, what should I say, in a more technical sense, or in a logical sense, as something that can be established. So how do we prove, what is an argument to prove the existence of this ultimate goal, this first of the two ultimate goals of liberation? So then the argument is one's own. Rangi means one's own, your own. It's true of all beings. So Nyelengi Pumbo means the five skandhas, not unqualified, but the five skandhas that are samsaric in nature, the five skandhas that are called the grasping skandhas. The grasping skandhas are ones that are produced by the mental afflictions, and the ones which give rise to new forms of the mental afflictions. Those that are samsaric in nature. Then that is a continuum, right? That's a continuum of impermanent entities. Its continuum can be brought to an end by the strength of its appropriate antidote. That's the thesis. The five grasping skandhas taken as a subject of the thesis, and the predicate are such that their continuity, they as a continuum, can be brought to an end on the strength of an appropriate antidote that marks the end of the thesis. And then the reason is because there is an antidote, because there is a powerful antidote which has the ability to, and literally the word is to harm them, but it doesn't mean harm them in a physical way. It means and harm them in the sense of is unable to put a stop to them. Nurje means the antidote. It's a powerful antidote. It has the ability to put a stop to them, and so therefore it's possible to put an end to our samsaric existence. Is essentially what it's saying. And putting an end to samsaric existence is in fact the meaning. So that's saying that's what the meaning of highest good is. To bring our samsaric existence to the point of terminating it.
Today, Yelengi Pungu Tiki said to do some Tataba Tobin. He is under many people children, Rangi Gyumed said to me, the this. The Rangi Gyumed Villa, for a Gyumed Villa, nature never to the others.
So we described the nature of our grasping skandhas as unsatisfactory even in our samsaric nature, is that we have no control over the fact that it just will go on forever as long as we're still subject to the mental afflictions. But that's not a perpetual state. We can terminate that condition of being samsaric skandhas because there is, so that means we can bring the samsaric skandhas to an end. Bringing them to an end is what liberation means, terminating them. And then we can assert that that is a valid then claim, because there is a form of wisdom, that is the antidote, a powerful antidote, which is the means by which we accomplish that. Or we can assert a slightly different argument, but which logically is talking about the same thing. We can say Dangjin Churjin Rei. So the belief in a real self, or a belief in real entities, grasping at a self, take that as a subject. The continuum of that belief is not something that is permanent in the sense of that it cannot be brought to an end. It is not permanent in the sense that it can be brought to an end, because, and then the reason is the exact same one. There is an antidote for that belief in a self, which is more powerful than that belief and has the ability to eliminate it. And therefore, one can put an end to, one can terminate the belief in a self. And the complete and total elimination of belief in that erring belief in a self is then synonymous with eliminating all the obstacles, and therefore that's the same thing as bringing the continuum of the skandhas to an end. Bringing the cause of the continuum of the skandhas to an end will bring about the end of the skandhas themselves. So you can word it slightly differently, but it's asserting the same sort of then point, which is that the highest good, in the sense of liberation, is something that is attainable and does exist.
장례들 메토 친구들 있는 거가 이나 신체니 근데 아니 다음에도 비실 신의 랑이 뒤에 내지 좀 우리 내지 님부터 님부터 다음에도 비실 제 그래서 다음에도 비실 공나 아니 그래서 이 때도 왔을 때 괜찮으네 말이죠. 난 뒤도가 단지디 전부에 중무 시절이야 그거가 아니 탈디 매체가 어디 매도 친구들이 아니 탈을 장대 분을 짓자는 매부수가 장례 짓자는 매부수가 이 체인도 장대 분을 짓지 매부체도가 어디서 다디나 시절이 다 캬바디 배디 된둥이 버리 배나 매도 진비 캬바는 사기시나 아니 장대 분을 짓자 수내가 매바시니 시게가
Chaba never single. Chab single. Chaba never. Right.
캬바디네 다디 캬바.
No, that's it.
다디 자 다지가 다데 그냥 단지 지지 지금가 중에는 된도 많이 대랑이 지가 지를 지금 이부터 세비 체체가 이부터 다음에도 비실을 들어봐. 랑이 지를 니지 님부터인데 얘는 이 진짜스네 특말이 가르스네 그래도 진비 잡았는데 시작이 시티나 장대 분지 진짜스네 범위도가 그 가르스네 그리 장례들은 니지 님부터인데 예선지를 봐서 다시 다음에 텔레파 잡았지 텔레파지 않는
So there's an example that is meant to illustrate the nature of the force of the argument, how the argument, the structure of the argument, if you like, how it is to be comprehended. So the example is given, and this is not a kind of just a. This is a coming from logicians. It's not poetic. It's meant to be a what should I say? Again, going back to the nature of how observable qualities in nature can be used to support reasoning. So, in this example, the condition of, in the case of that second form of the argument, is that the flaw, the mental error of believing in a real self, for example, is something that exists. But it's not something that that cannot be eliminated, that is capable of being brought to an end over time. So it's not totally eliminated all at once, but if you apply the right antidote to it, then as we described the nature of the path, over time you can reduce it until eventually it is completely destroyed. So an analogy or an example that serves to illustrate that is when you're exposed to, when you're in a cold season in the winter or during cold weather, the pores of your body and the hairs on your skin can stand up, and your skin can form. The ordinary word is called goosebumps. I don't know what the more technical term for it is, but anyway. So that condition, right, is something that can be overcome. It can be overcome if you physically are exposed to sufficient heat in order to overcome it. And heat, as a natural phenomenon in nature, is something that has the ability to overcome the phenomenon of goosebumps on your skin. So that is an illustration, a classic illustration, that is used to help explain the nature of the argument, which is the argument that's meant to prove the possibility of achieving liberation by applying the efficacious antidote to overcome the mental error of believing in a real self.
Angeli Tabajus Tatine Gyumed Sabati Taba Insu. Yelen Pundus Gyumed Sabati Ani Taba Insu. And the Tanzi Sabati Tabarva Tanzi Sabati Tapin Tamito Bishir Toki Ani Karasure. Tamito Vishirabi, any Toki, any does Kasube Gashite Namdu Nambi Tento Gaja Dinji Serva Cherva Tagara Godimba, Cape Chatiba, or did you send it Taku? Then this Sabati Tabasi. Tanyani Pundu Gyumed Sabati Tabasi. That it Chetan did to be done, and it nearly repetus. Nearly till the Tabata Tandi Kimaniba, nearly repetus.
That the election So then the first thing that you should take away from discussion is that liberation, which is one form of the ultimate Buddhist goal that is referred to by the technical term highest good, melek in Tibetan. If you want the Sanskrit, nishreyasa means that which has nothing higher, nothing better. Then what that refers to specifically is the grasping heaps, the continuum of the grasping heaps, when that continuum has been exhausted or brought to an end. Seva means terminated or then eliminated, caused to cease. That is the meaning of liberation. So then an argument that's meant to prove that is not just a meaningless claim, but something that is valid, a valid claim, the existence of that liberation, is the argument is based on the reason that there is a powerful antidote which has the ability to bring that about. Termination of the continuum of the grasping heaps. In the case of the first argument, that was described. And how that argument can be understood is that the main cause of that continuum, what sustains that samsara continuum, is the mental afflictions generally, and especially the belief in a real subjective self. So, Dhamme Dopa Shira, right, that wisdom that perceives selflessness, which is perceived in the sense of perceives it directly, which does not occur until you achieve the path of seeing for the first time, and then all the forms of that direct realization of selflessness that occur thereafter have the ability of being an antidote, right? So how do they serve as a powerful antidote that brings that continuum to an end? Is there is something that must be stopped, something that must be eliminated. Gakpa means which must be then overcome, if you like, right? And so the thing that is to be overcome is the seeds of the belief in a real self. And so those seeds are, those exist as elements of the continuum that is ongoing of the grasping heaps. So when you achieve that, for instance, the path of seeing, then that direct realization of emptiness has the ability to destroy initially some portion, its corresponding portion, of the seeds of that belief in the real self. And then when that action is completed, then the latter part of that meditative state is such that the mind of the person who gains that realization then takes on the quality that portion of the mental afflictions have been eliminated. And that quality of having been eliminated is the truth of cessation. So by continually generating truths of cessation, which are done, serially, then eventually that process can be completed. And therefore, the state in which the grasping heaps are maintained can be brought to an end.
That's the Taba to Buddha. That is it. Then something to us here, Tuji Gomle, the city, Tuji Chingu, Jawa, Dumal, Kumba, Tarchi, by Chelsea at the time. Jawa Dame to be shared, Kumba, Jawa, Dumal, Kumba, Tarchi, by Chelsea at the time, they tend to be so. Tanji Timber Tuyati, that Toba Tishi, the Panga Tishi, to be a ni Titaki, Joba to be a what is at the Leti Nunju Bashi Nani Nunju Bashi Nani, Ribatambu Tigi. Toji Ching Jawa Kumbaru Kumba Tarchi by images. Any Joa Dami to be shared Kumba Taji. Don't like you need to make it, but you are. Don't like you, but Tanji
So the other form of the ultimate goal, Buddhist ultimate goal, highest good. The second form of the highest good is unsurpassed enlightenment, the complete enlightenment of a Buddha. So the first argument, the one that we were just discussing, is the argument that's meant to prove the existence of liberation. So especially in this second chapter of the Pramanavarttika, the argument that is used to prove the second form of the highest good is that the two excellent causes of the excellent attitude of compassion can be cultivated for an extended period of time, many lifetimes, and brought to a state of culmination. And similarly, the form of practice that is represented by that same wisdom we had been talking about in relation to liberation, the wisdom that perceives the selflessness in combination with great compassion, that when they are cultivated continually, until they are brought to Tajimba, means that they are brought to a state of perfection or a state of ultimate refinement, then that represents proof of the possibility of being able to achieve the results, the excellent results of the Buddha's quality, which are identified by the epithet Sugata, meaning that the Buddha has eliminated not just the obstacles to liberation, but also all the subtle obstacles, and is literally one who has achieved the ultimate state of well-being in the sense of having eliminated the obstacles, and also then by virtue of that, then that endows him with the ability to be a savior, in the sense that he can lead others to their liberation. Then, more specifically, in the Pramanavarttika, as elements of that argument to address possible criticisms or objections to that article, to that argument, then there are two main ones are developed in relation to the first attribute of being the one who is desirous of benefiting the world. So the two objections are: it's not possible to cultivate that great compassion, over many lifetimes, and because there's no such thing as many lifetimes. There's only one life. There's no past lives. There's no future lives. There's only this life. That's the materialist view. So one significant portion of the chapters, the verses, section of the text, is meant to refute that objection, the materialist position, and at the same time further clarify that initial verse that we talked about the breath, the faculties, and the mind must arise from some prior moment that is of the same type, and that proves past lives, and so on. Then that's one part of the kind of what should I say? Establishing, in an overall sense, that argument. That's one main objection. And the other main objection that needs to be overcome was the one that even if there are many lifetimes, it's not possible to develop spiritual qualities to such a unlimited degree. So then that is also discussed in terms of pointing out that the mind is unique in that it is a so-called firm foundation. Ten means a foundation or basis. Tenba means firm foundation. So it's a firm foundation in the sense that spiritual qualities are supported and can be cultivated and will be retained and will be able to be improved, progressively over time. It's not like other physical, circumstances such as the relationship between water and heat. That water is not a firm basis for retaining heat. Right? And there was another example as well. So those are meant to contrast physical qualities or the development of certain kinds of qualities with mental qualities, spiritual qualities, that there is this possibility to develop them indefinitely. That's part of the overall argument to prove the possibility and therefore validity of asserting that Buddha is in fact someone who has achieved that goal. So in the case of the argument that proves the existence of liberation is largely based on the presentation of the Four Noble Truths, the 16 aspects, the description and the arguments supporting the 16 aspects of the Four Noble Truths. And in the course of presenting them, then there are also verses and sections of the text that are meant to refute opposing views, such as, in particular, the notion that there is a real uncaused and permanent soul or self, so which not all, but many non-Buddhists maintain. So that is something to be refuted. And the object to be refuted is the possibility of there being a real self. That is gaccha. A real self is the thing to be refuted. So you have to identify what that is, and that's an important element of understanding the argument and applying it into your spiritual practice. So this is not an exhaustive explanation of these points, but it is meant to kind of introduce you to the idea that the real importance of this text is that it presents arguments that are meant to prove through reasoning the existence of these forms of ultimate goal. And so if you study the text, if you learn the text, if you reflect on them, you can develop then a correct inferential understanding of the existence of liberation and the path leading to it.
That's quite chubby to the tower. Chubby to chubby to the Marva.
No, sir.
But Chivatamata very much. And the woman to something by the Chisilva. That Chibanamati. Pramanavarttika, Gyumed Shaurva. That is Ripati Tupurva. That Chiravitu Subi, Basingati, Lulatin, Baresigava. Rinpoche ngana chko maris Rinpoche ati Gyumed teni ke pare sigirba ani this sena ani ko tesam chi tangurba ya gomba se chi jobe
gomba
ba yu to se kyamata tu ani onga tundu ba che combatti un sono essere va che combatti un ma sono ani combatti sono tan jawangamati combatti ti ongre se va tati combatti ya combatti ti comare combatti giovane ti che segno per le ripati giovane che per la per lui che vari poi niente lui ci sceglie
combat pro
poi mi shabati
no
dai combatti ya ti shabi na
adi chiro karsa lumchoba chenepade di combatti shika semna to khapore also di karasa serena di korla Francis di Mayuba di Shewa Mabudu. So then this Shayan Duba and the Luchapa taught.
Combatti Candice English again.
Oh, that the shit one did. She don't consider us in okay, so let me. Rinpoche said that he said he's going back to this argument about that's an essential element of the overall argument to prove Buddhahood is the necessity to establish the existence of multiple lives, that there are past and future lives. So he then addressed the argument that is presented in the text that started out about the nature of the mind is such that it can only arise from something of the same kind, an entity of the same kind. The mind is a unique kind of entity, and it must be preceded by, its earlier moment must be preceded by something of the same kind. What Rinpoche said is, so we talked about that, and that has been, introduced, and some explanation has been given, and so what's important is that we should recognize that this argument in this text, in this particular text, by this author, and there are other similar arguments by other Buddhists about the existence of past lives. They are formulated by someone who saw those that type of reasoning, that type of analysis, and that type of presentation as being valid, as being effective. So what is the purpose, therefore, of studying this is that we should look at that argument, examine the argument, evaluate the argument for ourselves, and then there's a possibility we might come to the point of view that we are convinced as well. We find the argument sound, and we agree with it. On the other hand, it might not be absolutely convincing to us. At any rate, the point is that's the responsibility that we have, is not simply just to hear about the explanation and what its general features are, which of course is not without value, but the real purpose is for us to examine the argument ourselves and determine how effective it is. And ideally, we should find that it is in fact convincing. So if we don't, then becomes a challenge for us. So that's one point. He said, and of course, the materialists don't buy it. The materialists argue against it, and they say, no, mind can derive from some physical entity. It doesn't have to be perceived. That was one argument. Okay, that was something that we've talked about. And then the second point that's not really addressed in the Pramanavarttika, but it is also found in other forms of Buddhist literature. You'll hear teachers who are talking about evidence for the existence of past lives, which you said there were 5 different sort of approaches that can be used. The second one was instinct. Okay? Instinct. How do we account for instinct in newborn, sentient beings? Be they, animals that, a cow or some mammal that's as soon as it's born, it goes for the mother's breast to drink the milk. Where does that knowledge come from? So the Buddhist idea is that instinct is not learned. It's innate. If it's innate, then the Buddhist claim is it must have come from some prior experience. So gomba means some kind of habituation, some kind of similar experience, some kind of similar, situation. It was when it was born in a previous life where it looked for milk and instinctively, and that's why it does so now. So that's again given as a kind of argument for the existence of past lives. So I interjected because I know, in my own case, and in the case of science and Westerners, is that there's an awful lot of ideas and explanations that don't go along with that. So they explain instinct. Western science has a view of instinct that doesn't really is very much at odds with that claim. So I said to Rinpoche that, and he says, "Okay, well, what is that explanation?" So I'm saying, well, I'm not really sure I can give voice to it, but if anybody here wants to take that on, I'm sure Rinpoche would like to hear it. Anybody want to try?
Charles Darwin.
Huh?
Charles Darwin studied evolution, and he says the same thing, that from one generation to the next, one generation would learn, and then it would be given to the next generation intuitively through DNA or whatever. It's evolution.
Is that so? So we're saying DNA is evidence for instinct that comes. Nobody you has.
That was his.
His argument.
Yeah, Deepa.
Take the microphone. I don't know if that explanation really addresses specifically that kind of instinct. But go ahead.
Charles Darwin had 2 main arguments. One is that genetic structure changes.
All right. Okay.
By coincidence. And each of those changes produce biological beings, some of whom survive better than others.
No, but we're not talking about that.
Well,
we're not talking about that. We're talking about a newborn, a mammal in this case. How do you explain the instinct to suckle?
Well, his argument is that those instincts were transferred genetically.
Genetic. Okay, so it is
by whichever beings were best able to adapt and survive.
But again, it's saying that it's transmitted from the parent to the newborn infant through genetic structure. Through genetic structure, which is inherited from the parent, right?
It's a little more subtle.
Okay, so let's
a little more subtle.
Okay, go ahead.
The ones that survive go on to reproduce and thus transfer the genetics material that gives those instincts to the next generation. That's
okay. That disagree. That telling the anti get that so much yard grand the Dakarsa evolution figure. Evolution sesona ane senjen the Karsa Quran the Rick Kai but the Toge Dakarsa Jikengi come down Tumba, the Jitengi come Kadeji Yunayan, Senjen di 아니 슉 채워 가이 이봐 대저 내가 시그마래 그런서 듀링 되게 슉 초원 대저 아니 디지땡에 칸디 나가서 서마 투바 그런서 내가 시그마래 고소 시그래 그래서 또 채워 대저기 되게 또 채워 대저기 아니 많아 차그래 그런서 아니 이 소소소기 다 그런 소소소기 기회에 부담 이 가서 다 릭직바기 센센디 게겐디 아니 그런 기도가 아니 디 그런서 그 게자디 소소소기 투모 많이 배 누바 디 가르쳐서는 딱딱 늘 사람 나와 누바지 별에서 누바 디디 그걸 채워들 때서는 연나 그것도 디 부대를 파 기도가 그런서 딱 그자기 균에 아니 그런서 디 그런서 게자디 이나 레그레 안 딜레 때네 아니 디 콤지디 디 디나네 용그레 돈도르 딱 저를 봐서 딱 디 가서 리파기 소 리파기 짜오디 데서 제가 디 그런서 약간사 즐거워하는지 그래서 디 가서 옆에는 곰바디 사과도 곰바디게 그제스тер이 연결했으나 그쪽에 다가서 두 사람 나나 그저 오만 투야게 가리는 지금 랑신 소리지 디 가서 바차 소리지 디 가서 수기 제나네 조용그래서 그쪽에도 제산디 글박이 곰바디 말했을 와 제산디 늦잖아는데 디 쉽죠 쉽지가
대탈때 출력지는 추디는 미끼지 제티 짠 메시기를 추나네 미끼야디 야말와
미끼야
추나네 추제들라 추제들라 소자만 미끼야가
디 치고디 로버지기 디 니바디기 간사디 게 고마디기 거 고마디기 거지
아디티 치버봐 그 제티나는 주는 제티나를 간단 계지는 거야 시게로
다코라 센젠디 아니 코라 센젠 담보 가네스키야 그래서 디기 시게요 디 가사 아니 다가사 디 게게게 다 미세나 바바네 부부라 파지를 맞도 바바디 간에 주벌 주나는 게게를 게만 스티데게요 이네 가리네 디 regional 디 가사 쑥 규네 디 가사 랑신단 아니 고 케조가 디 파마네 아니 라게요 레스야
디디는 레이에바디 다디 제디나니 그 레셰리바 야부야 레셰리바 이 레이에바디 강가 지나니 기기야
Well, so I presented this general proposition about Western science, and so Rinpoche said he went back to the idea against the materialists, which is to say, well, where does sentient life come from in the first place, right? And I said, well, evolution doesn't really address that per se, which is true, right? I don't think that evolution has anything to say about, right, okay. But rather, it's mainly addressing this idea of instinct. And then sort of says, okay, well, that may be so. But then how do you account for this? Genetically, within the same family, siblings, there's a great variety there can be a great variety of attributes among siblings. So if they're receiving the same genetic makeup from the same parents, how do you account for the fact that some children are intelligent, other children are less intelligent, some children have other mental traits? Would it not be the case that mental nature, if it is completely present in the genes that are being transferred to the offspring, would there not be more similarity, more uniformity among offspring than is ever. So it's one counter argument to the.
So I can address that, but
Well, anyway,
yeah,
but let me see if
it's
anyway. That's what that one. Yan di yan so is king is so so maybe we. Okay, so he said, well, now he said, no, wait. He said, we're at the point where if you would like to further, this discussion along these lines, go ahead. It's okay to begin debating with Rinpoche. No, he's asking you to do so.
great. Okay. Well, there's two things I want to say. First of all, in terms of instinct of suckling, I know that there are many human children that don't suckle immediately. They have to be trained how to do so.
Right.
And so, to Wilson's argument, those who hadn't learned would die because they would starve to do it. So that's one thing.
So, but that observation is how does that come? What weight or where does it come down in this notion of that instinct is physical or not physical? How does it support either side of that argument?
And there are studies of the genetics of behavior that have proven that certain behaviors are passed through genetics. So that's in terms of Rinpoche's question about different siblings having different behaviors. Each person has two sets of chromosomes that carry different genes, and so only one of those pair gets passed to each child from each parent. So we get one of the two. So, but it does not argue for why identical children or identical twins who do have the same genetic material expressed differently, and then you can get into developmental biology and all those kinds of things about how differences in the womb might have affected the expression of genes, and so there's a lot of science around that.
Okay. That is called a case of Mongo years ago. That's Dr. Gina. That is Ganashena, Shaga. Moran District. Then, Pukukia Matavate, so Kasheki, Amagi, Numadilla, Karsa, Gometoki, Karsa, Omatuyaki, Nuvat, Yoamanes, Kasheki, the Omatuyaki, the Bachati, segment, and the Lapuga. Kasheki, the Malama, Koto Shigre. The day chaos, and all of the competitive do those. Then the ane Kansa competitive Sune over the Shamane over the Ketachi on my letter, the Jabata, that it does such the Dejiware sense, Ripa Kavachi Drive. At the Ine Kwanza Terba Senata, Kangalogi, Pamagi. Kuja dena, because of this language, Hamagi Kuja Naldi, Bubu Angalola Chipama, yes. Takarsa, the young Kranzo Kuja Nama, young Kranzo Chip, do Chara Menda, so she yare. And then Pubichi Kiduma, Rere Nama, and Tots Karsa, Meda Chip. Yoaita, and young Puji Kidugana, Pumuchi Kidugana, and Puyama Kidugana, Kosa Chipamim, the Netigas. The Chazan, the intimate Kuda Gangalogi, Chipa, and Shike Mares, Chicks figure, young. Yina and teaching a figure, Sema Yorwa, Sema de la Mandaya, Sema de la Amane, that Kalsa. Number two, and Chucks, Amagi Nubadi, Karsa, the Karsa Termana, the Gonga cigarette, and the Gonga Yare cigarette, Amane, Gonga Yare, and it caught the Konini Jane, and it Karsa Buchi, child. So some de la Goni, Gom and Bra, Ni Namne, and it Kudra Karsa, koa niigi nyamduchi the Ningsamjan and Punichi Kai, the Chema Chick, the Derrick Chick. Takoto the Chema cigarette, Samsam Budam, Bumo Gayare, Samsam Buni, or Samuni, Koto Chika Mares. Young Di Madrasi, Chema Chick Madrasi, or young Kashe Amane, Gona Chick Yibala, Gona di Ani Kua di Karsa, Drene. And Quran, Tapu Kidugala, and the Dini Jane, and Quran, Pelia Soldier, that's what the Pedugana, Dambo dig that in the cells, and that Takasa, Chumshogi, Chumsho Soldier. Hot the Shatne, Ni Chagger, Ni the She Chagger, She the Gay Chagger, the Soldier. Then Samsam de la Dambo di Gona Chig Yubala. Shabdu Ganla, and it called Senji Nike at the day. The Derby Senji Nike, Sama Nike, you gonna come to bed, kick down, Sama did bet the Dong down, Supu bet the Gila Inginal, identical twins, identical Sasuna Coranzo bet. Coranzo Vidakas, the Pamane, Tobiaki, Zed, the Togan, but Chica thinking address. Takoto Chica, Chica red, the Koto gets Hane. Young Kashegi does the Semgi Ramshin Bendards, the Yoga, and Abdiki Keva Tarjan, Yoga, Young Dilla, Serig, the Tachi Jenny, and get a moment. Gajo Metro was in it. That's like Gajo Chikoranzo, that told the Ganga, the Hamagi, Zene, Semgi Ramshin, and Sukanga, the Nechen Draga. Just Gomti and the Jampa and Shake Quran to the Bella Killing.
Quran Kawama Tenyeti, Nusun Tenya Yava. Or have Tawikan Yama. Tawikan could do the Kennedy. Sure to be a that
just understand the Emperor's tactic couple. So this says, well, what about the instances of people claiming to remember their past lives and know the names of people that they knew and being able to go and visit the place where they had lived their previous lives? So what does science have to say about that? And so there probably it's not a uniform what the opinion is about those phenomena. And then the fact of the matter is that Western science really is not very sophisticated about being able to elaborate about the nature of the mind.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask the argument about suckling. I assume that's a sutra argument. The reason I ask is because in Tantra, I think isn't one of the 80 prakriti, the Rangshin Gyechu, I think one of them is suckling, right?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, so I'm just wondering, it sounds like...
That's not limited to that, but anyway.
Right, but I mean in the sense that...
the impulse.
Right, that the impulse, it's like they want to say that for DNA, the impulse is physical. But then
in Buddhism,
the impulse is a factor of
the mental. Well, that's a good point.
But isn't it also that those 80 dissolve at the time of death and wouldn't carry over?
They do carry over.
Well, I mean, in the sense
they do, or they regenerate.
Right, but I mean, in the sense that they're just sort of like a natural part of having a mind. Right. That it's not necessarily.
But it's no physical, necessary explanation to account for. Right. But your first part of your question, Quran is speaking on Gomji and the Gyawa Namayogi Tuje Beja Namayora, the Kawayores, and the Quran Dor Namayore, Tenja Namayores, the Kasta, what's that? The Kiram Nam.
Yari, that, no Mambay. Kuntu Singer Tata Jagagi Pinditagi No Mambay, that Yeti,
there are a number of spiritual sources for that notion of instinct. I personally remember that one of the Jatakas gives expression to it. And so that's Aryashura from that time, but he's not the originator of that. No doubt there are many other sources that point to that as evidence of past lives.
Yeah, I think it
He says he'll take a look at some other texts and maybe let you know what he finds.
It's a different argument.
That has nothing to do with it's not tantric per se.
Right.
No, that's right. Then it goes up. Rangshin Gejun Nam Chikti Jiba saying it's the other one. Jiba.
Yeah.
The Rangshin Gejun Nam Chikti Jibyagi Bachasur Mane Topa Chigarama.
Yeah.
The rest Chibaras Numa Oma Tuya Jiba resting. So the one in the 80 Socrates is not well, it is sucking. It's not limited to nursing, other kinds of behavior.
Thank you, Rinpoche, for bringing up again that mind comes from like mind, so I could remember a question I had from 2 days ago. Could you ask Rinpoche to please elaborate on when he says mind coming from like mind, are we to think of that as just sentient mind, or is it human mind to human mind, animal mind to animal mind, and how does karma relate into how like mind, into the next life, like mind, that relationship? I'm not asking this question well, but do you understand?
I get the difference. Yeah, same kind, I mean, same kind of being.
Right, so it does like mind just mean sentient mind?
Yeah. So, ane karsa, kaya nga chik chuya ki rupati nane, ane di karsa jiva ke matapa ki rupati gyunjela, ane di ngela rik jawe rupati yingugres, rik jawa sen di koran sem yimbe rik jawa chidan sigare yang karsa jawa rik jogi nane ane mi rikpa sen di mi rikpa di ngana yingu gres ane dundro yimba di dundro rikta sem de yingu gres
Siku mare bengo mayimba seri chachi jogu resi gari de sitas kodat bengo leke bare chera ko
So, when it says like kind, it means something that is sentient. And to say that something which is mental is not, and then there's a word, a typical word for form or something that's physical is rupa, for in Buddhism, physical matter is general terms rupa. There's another term, bembo. I'm not really sure what the Sanskrit equivalent of bembo is. Do you know? Well, maybe we can find that out. But bembo has this idea of sort of being kind of, in my mind, sort of the nuance of it is that so the definition of the term bembo as a so Dundudruba, the definition of being something that is bembo or physical is something that is an aggregate of parts, especially like atoms. So something that is a collection, formed by a collection of atomic particles, that's a bembo. So that means something physical. So it's saying that mind cannot arise from things that are physical matter in that sense. So of a like kind means something that is not physical and is uniquely then a form of awareness, some kind of that quality that's unique to the mind. So it's an entirely different category of entity which of course is the crux of the argument, is there such a thing or not?
You
got something?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
It's related to yesterday. Rinpoche, when he was teaching the three distinctions regarding the Prasangika position on the nature of cessations.
Dangopa, 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 right? Okay.
The third one, Rinpoche said that the locus was the emptiness that's the object of the mind and the liberated path.
Right.
Which is still a state of
awareness,
a state of absorption.
Right.
So then, if that's the definition, then when the person gets up from that and is in subsequent attainment and is going about their daily life, like Rinpoche had said that at those times, appearances and even belief in true existence assert themselves.
Okay,
so
where you go?
What's the locus at that time?
Thank you very much. Ani golden seduka ani tongi yubati mato ani kalsa. 70 tengi tongi tendrege chayo mares sumber wakasa.
70
Mare di Rinpoche ki kesa ibayo. Golden seduka rangyube shezu jikdang tengyo shezu. Ka tengyo dela ani golden dela chani yaris. Kalsa tongi imbe chajikdang 70 tengi tongi. Mama ale
thank you very much. Tungi
제자. 동이 가서 탱교를 놓을 기지 좀 말해서 가서는 꼭된 거 컨테스트 문제 제기했으나 강기고 디 아니
강고 바디 반제티 체
강고 반제티
강고 바디
디 바타네도
시럽티 체
아니 강두고
바바신 디신이 된다
that 남들랑이 갑대로 디신이도
네 남들랑이 땡기 디신이
디 강두고
베톤 디니 체네 디텐도 카파니선 강도 고가세 디신이 프랑샤
제자 근데 이제 아니 대교로 꼭된디 코라토니 임바디 시기가 제가 코란디스가 다 코란디스가 아니 다 가서 번자 방배 내가지 아니 돈이 무슨 또 내가 남자 이식이 값들이 가서 직마도 가서 뭐냐지 디도 맞아요 말에 남자한테 디도 맞아요 말에 제단디 아니 제도기 내가 디 남자한테 왕게 내가 될라 아니 로라 아니 다빈디 kopten디 모습도 동니디 모습도 또베 다 가서 요 말에스
디디 말이지 남주랑기 제도 유아리 남주랑기 땡도 뚱이디 제도기 이시기 뚱이디 뭐 파주라 되게 어디 되게 제도들 나한테도 남주랑기 제도 뭐 주라
로
남주랑기 제도기 뭐 주라
제도기 뭐 주라 알레
내가 남주랑기 땡기 뚱이디 제도기 땡 뚱이를 해줘라 어디 되게
so any Quran June 6 June source
June ske marwa to
Tony Quran
June ske marwa 제가
내가
야때 제도비 시티 남주랑 June 봐
June
제도비 시티 남주랑 June
그래
제도는 이 시기 때문에 뚱이지 날 남들랑 때문에 뚱이지 제도지 시 레트지 때문에 뚱이 바래 버려 뚱이 그것도 시야 버려
알레 아니 그런
제가 뭐든지 뒤된도 야래 뭐든지 이때는 봐 뚱이 무슨 또 되고 말해
알레
그 빵도 잡아 뚱이 무슨 또 그냥 시작이고 빵 버려 봐 뚱이 무슨 또 빵데 냠샤 이시디 제도를 표현했을 전부 냠샤 이시기 때문에 고전도 라고 말이 제도
진짜 냠샤 땡기 돈이 쓰두가 냠샤 이시 코랑게 동니스기어레
그래,
미규를 말해.
냠샤 이시 그런 게 있는 동이지.
복된스 이제 냠샤가 이시 땡기 동니래.
말이지.
맞아. 코랑 똑똑자 데메스기어 말해.
무슨 말에 분배된 동이 또 그래 봐.
어래.
또 그래 이게 분배된 동이 지고 되려야 말이지. 다 조딩에서 그 냠샤 이시 대미 대남이네 아니 그 냠샤 이시 때문에 디까기야. 라제까기여서 대가서디 냠샤 이시 때문에 대미 대를 때문에 거기야. 그거 되려야 돼.
저선지 안에 같은 남조랑기 미규들스 거대스기 말해.
아,
미규 돈이 거또 여러와. 그래서 똑자디 대곡된 말해. 디 일쟁기 땡기 돈이 디 곡된스기라.
데려봐.
Okay. Maybe I.
어제 데려들 시다야.
Well,
최단적인 땡기 돈이 또 그래.
maybe I was confused and conveyed the meaning differently. If I understand correctly now, I hope I do better. The point was that there were those three aspects. What's being brought to cessation is the obscuration, right? What brings it to a state of cessation is the non-interruption path. And the locus where it exists once that cessation is achieved is associated with the liberation path. Right? The liberation path is the subsequent moment following the process that brings about the cessation. So the cessation has occurred. The cessation, I thought, meant the emptiness that liberation path is perceiving. Said, but Rinpoche said, is not so much the object that liberation path is perceiving, which is emptiness, as it's the emptiness of the mind at that stage when that cessation has been, what should I say, brought into being, or has occurred as a result of destroying the obscuration. And so so that's part of the mind's nature, right? And so when the person emerges from the meditative state, that ultimate nature of the mind is, continuing. And so in that sense, it doesn't cease.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wanted to respond to Rinpoche's question about how scientists handle the question of children who remember past lives.
Okay.
My experience is it's two ways. Some try to argue against it, and others just ignore it. Because if anybody accepts that observation, it would completely destroy their whole theory.
The current disagree. Cerebral disagree. Ani kya namage jimyong ne ani nga kya namade dejila kya le yare ani ne nang de yare mi moshamba mi de yare deji de bugu deji share yare was. Then cerebral deji deji yare was ji share do gan de la kan yare. Kachik de kon nordres. Chiki over the Cosenali or the Catures, Chick the Gapatjagre. Chick the Aniko the Donama, Chick Mares, and the Salutang Mores. Says that the Koranzo did dig Tobla, Koranzo the Samotang down, Kache Shingamidus. So that's the way, it's interesting. Did you try to basic it, right? Karsa Chibut Mare Karsa Jampas Dila Maton Chilmains.
Maton Chin the Chini Chipare. Could you Tonga Gain but the Kelly Gerba? Maton the Mensigari. There's a Gambetta Chili Chipare.
There's a recurring phrase in the Pramanavarttika, which is, in and of itself, is not, probative of anything, but it's sort of a recurring theme to talk, I don't know if it's correct to say disparaging way or not, but it's a sort of way to sort of refer to some opposing positions, and that is, it's not valid to say something exists because you don't perceive it. Matom is not to perceive it. That is not evidence that it doesn't exist. So it's basically saying your system doesn't know how to account for that, so you dismiss it as therefore non-existent. And that is typically a way of referring to the materialists. You discount things because you have no knowledge of them. So Rinpoche says that probably applies to. So the scientific method, right, relies on the premise that you have to create an experiment that will, validate the thesis, right? So that's the idea of seeing, right? That experiment. If you don't have a way of testing the hypothesis to prove it, a way of, in that sense, seeing it, then you have no basis for claiming that it exists. One can view it that way, but well, maybe we'll leave it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Share the highlights with Rinpoche. It's not very long.
Oh, really?
But it's basically saying
information about tomorrow's dinner. It's being sponsored. It's being sponsored here. So it is here at DNKL. We don't have to go to Westport, and it's at 5 o'clock after the meditation. So a few people asked for that clarification.